Elf. Aside from the traditional Christmas elf, there's a lot of stories spanning across the centuries that go into the characteristics and meanings behind the mythical creatures. In one of our previous entries covering Santa Claus the movie, they refer to him as the Vendiquim, which is just some made-up terminology for that movie, further confusing the history behind elves. Even at the beginning of the movie, Bob Newhart, or Papa Elf rather, goes into the details of some of the jobs suitable for elves, with the most popular being working for the Big Show, as he calls it. And this is where our story starts, as a runaway baby, if you will, crawls out of Santa's sack and stuns all at the scene. When you think about it, technically this makes Santa a kidnapper, right? Unintentional or not, it's still true. However, because he's from an orphanage, which must have been either his only stop of the night or one of his last, because it seems like everybody at the place knows where he was at,
He must have snuck into your sack at the orphanage.
Santa decides to keep the baby when an older elf volunteers to adopt him. Fast forward 30 years into the future, and the baby grows up to be Will Ferrell. And I'm glad it did, too. Let me explain. Elf was one of those movie projects that the original screenplay was floating around Hollywood for quite some time, and started in 1993, and originally had Jim Carrey attached to star as Buddy the Elf. Thankfully, that picture was shelved, and eventually Carrey left. Otherwise, he would have been associated with not one, not two, but 3 big-time Hollywood franchises. For a lot of actors, 1's too many. Nevertheless, 3. So Buddy, although human, is unaware of his origins, and just thinks he's one of the elves. Although he's 6 feet tall, and from what we see of the deleted scenes, somewhat of a brute on the ice it would seem. That is, until the truth comes out when Peter Billingsley, from A Christmas Story, brings up the subject to a coworker and Buddy overhears, quite literally making his world come crashing down. So he goes home, and Papa Elf explains what happened, and that his only living birth parent lives in New York City. Confused and disorientated by this news, Buddy seeks the advice of his neighbor, Leon the Snowman, who seems to know everything about the world.
I've been around the world many times when I was a young cumulus nimbus cloud. It's a wonderful place filled with wondrous creatures.
And doesn't everybody have someone like that in their life?
Oh, don't pay attention to Leon. He's never been anywhere. He doesn't have any feet.
So bravely, Buddy decides to head out to the big city in search of his father, leaving behind Papa Elf, the elves, and Santa, who gives him some need-to-know advice on the city before he leaves.
There are like 30 Ray's pizzas. They all claim to be the original, but the real one's on 11.
Not to mention his friends, the Claymation Kids, who have a hard time coming to terms with his departure. And so, as Buddy restates several times later, he
traveled to the 7 levels of the candy cane forest, past the sea of swirly, twirly gumdrops, and then I walked through the Lincoln Tunnel.
It's stated in the behind-the-scenes featurette that, in fact, during the filming of this scene in particular, there were several minor traffic accidents caused because people were so stunned to see Will Ferrell, dressed like an elf, walking through the Lincoln Tunnel. And Buddy's ignorance continues onward into the city, eating discarded bubblegum, wandering into crazy-looking coffee shops.
Congratulations! World's best cup of coffee!
And eventually to his dad's office at the Empire State Building, where he's tossed out because they think he's nuts, and travels to a place that the security guards suggest that he returns to, Gimbel's department store, which in real life doesn't even exist anymore, and the shot here is actually a CGI rendering of the Macy's department store. Almost a tribute, if you will, to Miracle on 34th Street. And soon after walking in, is mistaken for an employee and told to start getting back to work after he finds out that
Santa's coming to town!
Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
So, in anticipation of his arrival, redecorates the entire toy department, only to be greeted in the morning to a fake Santa.
You stink.
I think you're gonna have a good Christmas, all right?
You smell like beef and cheese. You don't smell like Santa.
Needless to say, this doesn't end well, as Santa literally takes the time to destroy everything Buddy worked on so hard the night before in preparation of the imposter's arrival, and then gets tossed in jail, where he later reconnects with his father, who bails him out, and introduces him to the family. And the fun's just starting. We still have snowball fights, long cold nights, mail rooms, and scary frights, and group singing that delights. All await you in this fantastic comedy, brought to us by Buddy's Doctor.
No!